Hello and welcome to NPTEL MOOC on Applied Electromagnetics for Engineers. We are now coming to the end of the course. We will complete the course by discussing a very important topic called antennas. Okay. Antennas are the systems that you use to generate waves. Remember, in the previous modules we have talked about waves, plane waves propagating in free space, plane waves propagating in dielectrics. What happens if plane waves are incident upon a conductor, good conductor, bad conductor? We have seen all that. We have also seen how you can confine these plane waves into certain structures known as waveguides. These waveguides, we have seen examples of metallic waveguides, which meant that they were these hollow metallic tubes, right? We considered the rectangular cross section, but you could also consider them to be circular cross section or any other type of cross section. So we have seen how you can use these metallic boundaries to confine and transmit energy from one point to another point. So this is how you take the energy from an electromagnetic wave and actually guide it from point to point, and that is what is called as a waveguide or a waveguiding system. We have also seen an example of a dielectric waveguide, that is, we have specifically studied the example of an optical fiber, which essentially does the same job as a metallic waveguide, in that it will take the optical energy in the form of a electromagnetic wave and then guides it from one point to another point. Okay. But we never talked about how these waves themselves are generated. I mean, what mechanism is responsible for generating a plane wave that is propagating from one point to another point in a given direction, or propagating in a given direction, or how is this wave generated and coupled into a wave guiding system, right? So what mechanism is responsible for generating electromagnetic waves, and that is the question that we want to answer in this and the next few modules as we come close to the finishing of the course or completing the course. So before we can actually talk about how waves are generated, I want to introduce you to an important quantity. In many cases, this important quantity that we are going to discuss is just used as an intermediate step in the analysis of the fields that are emanating from a given current distribution or in some kind of a distribution. But in other ways, this quantity that we are going to discuss is actually much more physical, in the sense it is a fundamental quantity which unfortunately cannot be measured directly, but it has certain ramifications to the overall structure of electromagnetic theory. Okay. So what is this quantity that I am talking to you about? Now, to introduce you to that quantity, let us recall Maxwell's equation, okay, for magnetic fields, the so-called Gauss's law for magnetic fields, which is given by the magnetic flux density vector B, or in simple terms we will also call this as magnetic field. So this del dot B, which represents the divergence of the field B, this is equal to 0, correct? So we have this physical significance of this equation that we have discussed, means that if you look at the magnetic flux lines, these flux lines always close upon themselves. There is no starting or an ending point for these flux lines, they are continuously closing upon themselves, and that happens because there are no free magnetic charges in the universe, and therefore this del dot B is actually equal to 0. Now, vector identities also tell us that any vector field whose divergence is 0 can actually be expressed as the curl of some other vector quantity. Okay. What we mean by this is that since B has no divergence, B can be expressed as curl of another field quantity, which we will denote as A. Okay. We will later see that this vector field that we have denoted by A will be called as vector potential. It is usually defined only for magnetic fields. In certain cases, in the region where there are no charges, you can also define an electric vector potential, but that is not of much use to us, so we won't really do that one. So this vector potential is by default usually associated with the magnetic flux density or the magnetic field H itself. Okay. So we will see later that the equations that describe how this field vector A changes is actually very similar to the equations that the electric scalar potential satisfies, and that is the reason why this is kind of called as a potential function, but this time this potential will be a vector potential rather than a scalar potential. Okay. So B is del cross A, and through this equation we define what is the vector potential A. Okay. Of course, we will shortly develop the equation that will allow us to calculate A from the current distribution J that is known throughout in the space. Okay. How do we do that? First, let us look at the other Maxwell equation that we have, which is Ampere's law. We will consider conducting medium so that there is no displacement current, or we will neglect the displacement current in this particular case, and in that we know that the curl of the magnetic field H is given by whatever the current distribution that is present in the space. So, curl of H is J. Luckily, we are considering only non-magnetic media, so which means that B can be expressed as mu naught times H. So, this allows me to write, instead of B equal to del cross A, by substituting B equals to mu naught H, I can write this above equation as H equals 1 by mu naught curl of A. Okay. So, this is interesting. I can write this as 1 by mu naught curl of A, but then this equation that we have, curl of H, the so called Ampere's law, means that we have to take curl on both sides. So, we do that. So, we take the curl on both sides. So, 1 by mu naught is a constant, so there is no effect of that. So, I can pull that out, and then you have a del cross A term. Now, del cross A is something that you know, right, how to expand that out, because you have seen this quantity when we discussed the wave equation for the electric field or the magnetic field. This quantity is simply del of del dot A minus del square A, correct. So, this must be equal to mu naught into J, where J is any current distribution that is found in the space, and I have taken this 1 by mu naught on the left hand side of this expression onto the right hand side, so that J scales up by mu naught. Mu naught is a scalar constant for us. Okay. Now, how do we proceed further? How do I simplify this equation? I can simplify by considering a particular specification for the divergence of A, and we set the divergence of A to be equal to 0. When I do that, I obtain del square A to be equal to minus mu naught J. This particular choice of del dot A equal to 0 is called as the Coulomb gauge, okay, or Coulomb meter. Okay. So, gauge is the word that is used in physics to denote this one. So, it is essentially a way in which you specify the divergence of a vector quantity, because any vector field needs to be properly defined, needs to be defined both, or needs to be given both its divergence as well as its curl. The curl of A is already given to us, it is the magnetic flux density B. So, the divergence of A luckily has, we can choose it whatever we want, and in this case, to simplify matters, I have simply taken it to be equal to 0. Later we will see that when time varying fields are present, then this choice is not really a good choice. Okay. So, you will have to modify this choice. That is why this is our choice. So, this choice is usually called as Coulomb gauge, and in the other choice, in the time varying scenario, we will encounter what is called as the Lorentz gauge. Okay. So, at least for now, we know del square A is equal to mu naught J. So, this equation is actually very similar to another equation that you have already seen. What is that equation that you have seen already? Well, do you remember del square phi is equal to minus rho v by epsilon naught in a medium, where rho v was the volume charge distribution and phi was the electric scalar potential. The Laplacian of this phi was equal to minus rho v by epsilon naught, or together these two things was called as, or this equation was called as Poisson's equation, right. So, this equation del square A equals minus mu naught J is exactly similar to this equation, except that you now have a vector on both sides, and in place of epsilon naught you have 1 by mu naught. The minus sign also is the same, and we also know how to solve this equation, right. So, when we wrote down the formal solution of this phi equation, we wrote that solution as phi at an observation point is given by integral, sorry, this is a triple integral. This was rho v at the field point, or sorry, that the source point, divided by 4 pi epsilon naught r minus r magnitude, integrated over the entire volume, correct. So, I hope you can see this equation, otherwise you can refer back to the previous modules where we have discussed the formal solution of this Poisson's equation. Given the volume charge distribution in the space, and the potential at any point r can be obtained by solving this triple or volume integral. Now in this expression for the magnetic vector potential, you can't really directly go and write it in this form, because A has to be first decomposed into its component and then checked to see that this equation will hold component wise. Luckily for the case of Cartesian coordinate system, this holds, because A can be written as, in terms of its components, x hat Ax, y hat Ay plus z hat Az, and similarly you can write the same decomposition for J. I will let you to finish this one. And then when you go back and look at the Laplacian, luckily the Laplacian is a linear operator. So for a single component, maybe Ax, Ay or Az, you can actually decompose that vector equation into 3 scalar equations. So here you will have del square Ax equals minus mu naught Jx, and now instead of phi we have Ax, and instead of epsilon 0 we have 1 by mu naught, and instead of rho v we have Jx. So what should be the solution for Ax now? It's very easy to write. Ax at the observation point, remember this observation point is the field point, the point where you are actually evaluating the magnetic vector potential. So Ax at r can be written as integral, right, mu naught Jx at the source point integrated over the entire volume charge distribution. So here is how Jx is distributed, sorry, Jx has to be along the x direction. So let us say this is how the Jx field is distributed at the source point, and at any other point where you are evaluating the vector potential because of this A, you will see that the vector potential will also be in the same direction as that of the source current distribution, and it will, so you have 4 pi r minus r prime, where r minus r prime is essentially the distance. So if I define this r minus r prime and denote it by r, which is the distance from the source point to the field point, okay, so this is the source point to the field point, then the magnetic vector potential will also be in the same direction as that of the current distribution. Okay. If the current distribution is in the form of a thin line or a linear current distribution or a wire like current distribution, then you do not really have to integrate over the entire volume, but you simply have to integrate over the line distribution. Okay. So in that case it can be, you can rewrite this one as mu naught Ix of r prime, okay, or L prime or something other. So it would be a line current distribution, so 4 pi r. Okay. Again this will have the same direction as that of the current distribution. The vector potential is always directed along the current distribution. Do you see now that actually introducing A was a very interesting phenomena, because if you had to directly calculate the field B or calculate the field H from the current distribution, you would have seen that the field H is not in the same direction as the current distribution, right, because the field would actually try to circle the current distribution, it would not be at the same direction as that of the current distribution, right. So with by by introducing this intermediate vector potential, what we have done is to obtain a field quantity that varies in the same direction as the direction of the current distribution, and which can now, once you have determined this one, this is rather easier to determine compared to determining the field quantity which does not vary in the same direction, right. Once you have determined the potential, then it is a matter of finding out the magnetic vector potential by appropriate numerical method, appropriate analytical or numerical methods. Okay, and you can use all the techniques that we discussed for solution of Poisson's equation, like method of moments or so on, to evaluate Ax with the current distribution known to you. Okay, not the method of moments, the finite difference methods that you can actually use. So in many ways the intermediate solution or the intermediate quantity A really is important, because lot of those problems which cannot be solved by the conventional methods of connecting J and B can now be solved with the help of A. Okay, one such example which is slightly difficult to solve with the direct way of proceeding from B to H is that of a short dipole or a short current element. Okay, what is this short current element? We will assume that in free space you have kept a short current element which is very thin, although for purposes, illustration purposes, I show it to be little thick. This current element has a length of delta L, which will be assumed to be very small. So in essence it is kind of a point kind of a thing, and you know, if you are at a particular point P where you are trying to evaluate the magnetic vector potential, okay, we will also assume that this current element is placed along the z axis, okay, and then you have x and y axis, whatever that way that we have defined, and from the origin you are there at a distance of r to get to the field point P, and the current distribution must be obtained at this point. This is the actual distance that you have, okay. So they are actually so close to each other that I can't really distinguish between the red line and the black line, okay. So the black line represents the distance from the origin to the point P, which is the vector r, and this vector, you know, from this one to here is your r prime vector, the source point vector, and the red line is the vector r, or the magnitude of the vector r, okay. And as I said, we are so far away that the distance r from the source to the field point is approximately the same as the distance of the magnitude r. As you can see, right, they are almost same, the distance between the two, and this approximation improves as and when delta L goes off to 0. That is, if the line element starts to appear like a point, then there is essentially no difference between the point on the line element to the observation point, or from the origin to the observation point itself. So this is the kind of approximation that we would like to use. But at this point, how do I calculate the magnetic vector potential? Well, there is no need to even perform the integral, because the current over this short, you know, current element will be assumed to be uniform and constant. So this integral of Ix of r prime, or rather in this case it would be Iz of r prime dl, can be simply rewritten as, or can be simplified as, mu naught by 4 pi small r, because we have made capital R approximately to be the magnitude of the small r itself. So that is nothing but r, and as I said, you do not have to integrate because current is along the z direction and it is of course constant over the line element that we have taken. So you can write this as, if current is I, then this would be I delta L, okay. What would be the direction of this magnetic vector potential? This is very crucial. The direction of the magnetic vector potential will be along z direction, because we also place the current element along the same direction, okay. So you can see that the magnetic vector potential has been very easily calculated, and we know that it is given by mu naught I delta L by 4 pi r along the z axis. Now what have we actually achieved by this? Well, you are looking at the spherical coordinates. So if this is your z hat vector, in the case of spherical coordinates you have r, theta and phi as the unit vectors. R direction will be along this way, and since this is going off to the observation point P, the angle between the z axis, that is the current element, and the observation point that you are looking at will be given by theta. And at this point you will also have, right, so how do you reach to this z unit vector? There will also be a theta vector. So this is how the theta vector will be, which will of course be directed along the dashed line that I have shown. But to reach from r prime to z prime, you will have to take a parallel vector parallel to theta, but it would be in the opposite direction. So you will actually have a minus theta vector, okay, and you can show from the transformation formulas that we have seen, or from a simple geometry, that the z hat vector in the Cartesian coordinate system can be rewritten in terms of the spherical coordinate system as cos theta along r minus sin theta along theta, correct. So if you take z hat, go over to r, it would be cos theta, project it over r, z hat project it over theta, actually you will be projecting it over minus theta, and that would be equal to sin theta, okay. So this is z hat, which immediately means that I can go back and replace in the previous expression for r, you know, z prime over here by r and theta components, and when I do that, I see that the vector potential A in the spherical coordinate systems, which is the coordinate system that we will be interested in when we discuss antennas, is composed of two components. One is the r component and the other is the theta component, okay. And you can find out what this AR and A theta are. They are essentially the same expression that we have written, mu naught I delta L by 4 pi r, but now multiplied with cos theta and sin theta. We will not proceed further to calculating H and B because we will revisit this example later on, or H, B and E for that matter. We will revisit this example later on when we discuss the fields generated when the time varying current is incorporated and what would be the radiation fields, as we call them, for the short current element or the elementary dipole as sometimes it is called. But the ideas that we have developed up to this part will be used immediately in the next module to actually find out this H, B and E vector. So keep these ideas in mind. Okay. If you want, you can also take this as an exercise and then find out, before you go to the next module, what should be the H field. Okay. To get to the E field, we will come back later because we have to develop now a relationship between E and H. Okay. So this is an optional exercise for you in case you wish to sharpen your curl operations or how to find out the curl of these equations in spherical coordinates. You are welcome to do this exercise of finding what is H given del cross A. So you can pull up the formulas for curl from a textbook and do this one. Okay. In the remaining few minutes, what I would like to do is to relate this electric field E to magnetic field H, right. So how can I do that? I mean, not H but the magnetic field vector A. How can I do that? Well, we begin by going back to the equation which connects electric field to magnetic field. So del cross E is equal to minus mu naught del H by del T. But I know that H can be written as del cross A by mu naught, and 1 by mu naught and mu naught cancel with each other. So this becomes minus del cross A, right. So there is a del by del T, and interchanging the positions of del and del cross and del by del T, I can rewrite this one as del cross minus del cross del A by del T. So I have on the left hand side a curl of electric field, right hand side some curl of some other quantity, and there is a minus sign. So I can actually push this quantity to the left hand side and obtain del cross E plus del A by del T. Okay. Now we are considering the time varying field. So please note, we are considering the time varying field. So the medium can be conductive or displacement or the dielectric medium or some combination of between the two, but in any case we have the time varying field. That is the reason why electric and magnetic fields are getting coupled to each other. If not, they would not have coupled to each other. So this del cross E plus del A by del T is now equal to 0. But if you, instead of writing this E plus del A by del T, if I call this as some F vector, then I know that if the curl of any vector is 0 or any vector field is 0, then that vector field can be expressed as gradient of some other vector, correct. So I can express this E plus del A by del T as gradient of some other vector, and that some other vector, if we take to be the same vector as the potential, electric scalar potential, then we have a relationship between E, phi and A. It is a beautiful relationship because as t tends to 0, that is, or rather as del by del T tends to 0, in other words, as the frequency gets lower and lower at very low frequencies, the term del A by del T, which is the coupling term between electric and magnetic fields, vanishes, and then E will simply be related to the electric static scalar potential minus gradient of phi. So this is very important. As the time variation is 0, the fields become static, and in the static regime there is no coupling between electric and magnetic field. So you can think of this del A by del T term as the term that actually couples electric field E to the magnetic field H. Okay. Now that we have written E plus del A by del T as the scalar potential, is it possible for us to go further? Can we write something more to find out what will happen to the relationship between A, or how the equation for A will be modified under this time varying condition? Yes, we can do so. We start by going back to H and A. This is given by H is 1 by mu naught del cross A, taking curl on both sides and simplifying del cross A on both, which we have already done so in the previous a few minutes ago. So this would be del of del dot A minus del square A, right. There is 1 by mu naught out there. So this is the equation. So let's write down this. What is del cross H? Del cross H in the medium where you have both conductivity as well as you have dielectric, or rather the displacement current, will be given by J plus epsilon naught del E by del T, correct. So it will be J plus epsilon naught del E by del T, which should then be equal to 1 by mu naught del A minus del square A, okay, and you can take this mu naught onto the left hand side, and therefore this becomes mu naught J, which is okay. This is the term that you actually expect, and then there will be one more mu naught epsilon naught del E by del T, which is fine. There is no problem out there. What we are trying to do is to see if I can rearrange the equation. So let me bring this equation onto the left hand side and still retain this entire thing. So del of del dot A minus del square A should then be equal to mu naught J, which is also fine, but then I have E. E can now be related to, or E can be related as, or written in terms of phi and A as minus gradient of phi minus del A by del T. Of course there is a del by del T onto the whole thing, so I did not write that one. So can I rearrange the equation? Yes, there is one gradient term onto the left hand side. There seems to be one more gradient term on the right hand side, although other terms are not present. So this would be equal to mu naught J, first simplifying the right hand side, and then there is a minus sign up here. So there is a minus mu naught epsilon naught del square A by del T square. Okay, so you have minus mu naught epsilon naught del square A by del T square. Then you have one more term which is minus mu naught epsilon naught, or gradient can be pulled out. So minus mu naught epsilon naught del phi by del T, and then you on the left hand side you have del square A, which is the term that is the Laplacian of A, plus gradient of del dot A. Okay, now if I bring these two together, right, onto one side, I get del of del dot A plus mu naught epsilon naught del phi by del T gradient, and I can go and choose this entire term to be equal to 0, and when I do that I obtain what is called as Lorentz gauge. Okay, so this gauge tells you that del dot A is equal to minus mu naught epsilon naught del phi by del T. So somehow the divergence of A was now found to be related to the scalar potential in order to simplify this equation. So if I have done that, what are the terms that are remaining? So this term is gone, this term is gone. So the term that is now remaining is consisted only of, or consists only of the vector potential A, right. So this will be del square A, that should be equal to, there is also minus mu naught epsilon naught. So when it goes to the left hand side it would become plus, but there is a del square A which is minus. So if I take out the minus sign, so the minus sign will go away from this one, but then if I rearrange the whole thing, okay, so I will get this minus mu naught epsilon naught del square A by del T square should then be equal to minus mu naught J. Okay, so this is the wave equation that you would obtain when there are time varying fields for the magnetic vector potential A. We will solve this equation and look at the ramifications of this equation in the next module. Thank you very much.